Welcome to Work Beautifully, a podcast brought to you by Dialpad that discusses growth, learnings, and pitfalls to avoid in business.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Season 3 of Work Beautifully, a podcast brought to you by Dialpad, covering the latest in business communications and AI. I'm Grace Lau, Director of Growth Content here at Dialpad, and I'll be your host for this season. Back in Episode 3, we chatted with Natalie Owen, ASR Senior Manager at Dialpad, and we talked about ethics and AI. You can catch that episode on Spotify. In this episode, we're joined by Jonas Robertson, Manager of Speech Recognition at Dialpad, to answer some of Reddit's most popular questions about AI. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jonas.
It's a pleasure, Grace.
Yeah, I'm really excited about today's episode because I've seen so many interesting questions on Reddit just about AI in all of its forms. But do you want to start by introducing yourself to our audience and telling them a bit about your role here at Dialpad?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined about 5 years ago at a small startup called TalkIQ, and I've been doing automatic speech recognition, or ASR for short, since then. TalkIQ got acquired by Dialpad about 6 months after I joined. So we've had the opportunity to basically move all of our stuff and integrate it into Dialpad. We did that very shortly after the acquisition, and we've been just cruising forward with trying to build the best possible ASR system for Dialpad.
Cool. And how did you get into speech recognition and the field of AI?
So I was back in the day. I was living in Korea, and I was teaching people languages, and so
Cool.
I was doing some postgraduate work there related to teaching people languages, and I wanted to keep going with that and keep studying, and so I one thing led to another, and I ended up looking to teaching computers languages instead. So I moved to Scotland, and I started doing some postgrad work there in speech and language processing, and that's sort of how things went.
That's pretty rad. I was actually considering teaching English in Korea or Japan as well after my BA, and yeah, it seemed like a really fun time just from all the programs that I saw. I don't know how much of it was legit, but yeah, cool. Let's get into some questions from Reddit. We've got a bunch. So how I found these questions was basically searched artificial intelligence, AI, and there were a few subreddits that kept coming up. So these are questions you probably would have come across maybe on your own. So yeah, let's get into the first question from Reddit. This one was pretty popular. It got 38 comments from different folks. So would love to hear your response to this one as well. But the first question is, what would you like to ask an artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so I think when I hear this type of question, I would imagine that they're thinking of something that's what we call sentient, or something that would know things that humans wouldn't, or
Yeah.
be kind of, this godlike
Mhm.
power, right? So something that's above humans, right? So um, I think for me, when I
Mhm.
think about that, as someone who's in AI, I know that we're not there at all. So we're not anywhere at a point where um, computers have more knowledge necessarily than humans, right? So um, so that kind of doesn't really
Mhm.
inspire me to ask anything to an AI right now that wouldn't already be known by a human expert, because right now we're taking AI systems, and we're we're training them based
Mhm.
on knowledge that already exists by humans, right? So if you look at some of the some of the big
Right.
systems right now, like for language modeling, like GPT-3 or one of these systems, right? So there's lots of things that they can spit out, but it's all based on existing knowledge that's getting passed into them, right? So they might be good at answering certain, trivia questions or something like that are in there in the data, but they're not going to come up with something that's going to,
Mhm.
something along the lines of, like how many years left does the world
Yeah.
have or something like that. It's not quite as straightforward. I would expect that a human expert
Yeah,
right now
yeah.
would have a better answer than an AI system.
True. So you've seen behind the curtain and you kind of know already like what's behind the magic. So, yeah, that's an interesting point actually.
Yeah, so it's I don't think that I would be able to answer the question in the same way that somebody in a more imaginative sense would.
Right.
But yeah, being an AI, I think one of the things that AI is particularly good at is making predictions, right? So it is certainly possible that one might be able to predict something like, you know, am I going to get a particular disease,
Right.
or what are the odds that I will live past 80 or something
Yeah.
like that. So those types of questions, could be potentially askable at this point in
Yeah.
time, but it's not with certainty, but like with probabilities, right? So.
Right. Yeah, I think that's actually really interesting. One of our, I think, healthcare customers that we did a customer story with, they also use AI in that way to kind of help the patients or predict like the likelihood of, I don't know, reinfection of an injury or something. But yeah, that's pretty neat. Okay, second question, kind of a variation, a spinoff of the last question. But what are some decisions that must never be left up to AI?
Right. So with this type of question, I might answer also a little bit differently from how most people would ask. I think there are some obvious things that are brought up and from an ethical perspective, and I'm sure that Natalie probably brought some of these things up last time on the last episode. But for me, I like to kind of sum it up from the perspective of don't make AI do the decision making for you, right? So in the little things in life that are there, like should I leave now, or should I have hamburgers for dinner, or pasta for dinner, right? So in these types of situations, right, I think we're going to see AI coming up with suggestions more often. Like even now, like with a fitness app, like on my smartwatch, for example, it's going to prompt me to um, go for a walk if I don't meet my calorie limit or something like that. And if that's the case, that's going to affect my decision making potentially. If I think, oh well, I need to do that instead of perhaps doing something that is actually more priority, like, taking care of my kids or something like that, right? It's something that I think that AI has the ability to just prod us in very small ways. Um, and if it ends up effectively dictating all of the decisions that we're supposed to be making in our own lives, that's an issue that I think we need to be very seriously thinking about here.
Definitely. I think the way that we use or not use AI in different contexts is another big thing for sure. So, on a slightly different tangent now, we're going to get into the art space. Do you think generative AI, so for folks who might not know, I think this is referring to AI that can create art or um, yeah, different kinds of like paintings and forms of art. So generative AI, do you think generative AI will disrupt the artists market or will it help them? And this one was
Yeah.
pretty controversial. It stirred up quite a bit of discussion, had 74 comments and hundreds of upvotes.
So generative AI is getting a lot of attention these days. It's not something that has been around for too long of a time, but it is quite impressive as to what it can do. So, like
Hmm.
Grace, as you were saying, it has the ability to create things in particular styles. So it tries to effectively emulate and kind of copy uh, a particular artist's style. If we're talking about the creativity with generative AI,
Hmm.
then it's making things that look in many cases just like the artist it was intended to make, or sound like if it was the case of
Mm.
music, right? So that certainly has artists worried, I'm sure. But at the same time, I think it's not necessarily going to put as many artists out of a job as you might think. Everyone
Hmm.
has reacted in positive and innovative ways in the past to new tools, and this is just a new tool. So certainly,
Mm-hmm.
if someone wants, a new album cover or something like that, and they want to go to a generative AI system and just pull something out for $0 and 0 cents, and something that looks fine
Mm-hmm.
for whatever they want to use, that's okay. But I think that artists can do creative things with this type of generative work as well too, in the fact that they can feed it their own style and produce,
Mm-hmm.
say, an order of magnitude more pieces of artwork than they would be able to do under normal circumstances. And that is the type of thing that they can also, curate themselves. So right now with generative AI, you do have to kind
Mm-hmm.
of spend a lot of time fiddling around with things to kind of get something that you might actually like, and you might never come up with that thing, right? But what an artist
Right.
could do is do that work for you, right? So use it effectively as a tool,
Mm-hmm.
just like we've used the powerful tools of Photoshop and some of these other imaging tools
Yeah.
to come up with things that we
Yeah.
never could before, right? So same thing here.
Yeah. I've seen folks compare um, generative AI to a camera. I think it was an artist on one of the subreddits, and they're saying that when the camera was invented, that's just they're comparing it in their heads to that, like with generative AI. And that was interesting. I never really thought about it that way. But yeah, it seems like just another big leap in an art form, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, it's you could compare it to the camera, or to, from an audio perspective, the ability to just have, like a digital workstation, or like just even like a multi-track tape
Hmm.
recorder, some of these things that completely revolutionize the ability to do certain things with music and audio that
Yeah.
would never ever have been possible without these particular tools, right? So, we say, for
Hmm.
example, like with audio, there was a time where people worried that you know they're going to sample my work, they're going to remix it into some other work, and it's
Hmm.
it's not going to get credited properly or something. But
Yeah.
ultimately it has allowed for much more creativity overall. So I think that's a net positive for
Oh,
sure.
that's true. Yeah, sampling for sure, like in hip hop music. I think that's just such a huge um, part of the evolution of that genre. And yeah, that's really interesting. So theoretically, this is like a random question, but theoretically, would it be possible with generative AI then to take like a dead composer or like a dead artist and then create kind of more music or art that's in that style? Like maybe, if it's Mozart and he died really early, he died really young, and if someone was curious, like if he composed more music, what that would sound like, could a generative AI do that as well?
Absolutely. So now with, say, for example, the imaging AI called DALI 2, what you can do is you can say, paint me a picture of whatever, somebody dancing or
Hmm.
doing something, and do it in the style of Picasso. And boom, it
Hmm.
produces something in the style of Picasso. And or I've even seen I believe a few attempts to come up with ways of using AI to basically finish unfinished works posthumously for certain artists.
Amazing.
I
Yeah.
think that's something that we may see occasionally happening a bit more. We've already seen it in the film industry, where say for an example, an actor or actress has died, during the filming, and then they've basically used various
Hmm.
imaging technology to fill in the blanks, and to come up with ways of making
Right.
that happen. So we'll see that, I think, a bit more as well too, using that particular tooling to do things posthumously for sure.
Wow. That's wild. But that also, I think, nixes the next question that we originally were going to go through, which was related to creativity. So I think, given everything that we've just discussed, I think the answer to this next question is probably no. But just for your context, the next question was going to be, will AI end human creativity? And I don't know, feel free to jump in and disagree, but I think just everything we just said, I think it can enhance human creativity on a whole new level for sure. But it's just doing things at scale, maybe,
Yeah,
like
doing
without
things at
AI.
scale. I think that where AI has the ability to stunt creativity is when it's used in ways that people just aren't thinking. Right? People are feel like
Hmm.
they're in a box because the AI system is trying to keep them in a box. It's limiting the potential
Hmm.
answers, or it's trying to just make something within a certain framework. Like one example that comes to mind, it's
Hmm.
not necessarily an AI model perhaps, but there was the auto tune, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but I'm sure that you've heard,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
they, we're we think of that as the funky sounds that come out of certain artists
T-Pain.
in the past, right?
Yeah.
That it's sort of
Yeah.
overused and at a cheesy effect at this point in time. But when it was
Hmm.
actually produced, it came out as a way to take someone who is singing not necessarily in tune all the time. So, perhaps they miss a
Hmm.
few notes and stuff like that. And this system would just very gracefully correct those wrong notes, right? It would pull
Mm.
things into tune if they were just
Hmm.
singing a bit out of tune, right? And so uh now some people use that because it was a good thing, and it just
Hmm.
polishes things up. People did eventually begin to criticize it for that purpose, because then it sounds a little bit too perfect, right? It sounds a little bit spot on. But
Yeah.
you know so in that basic sense, it has the ability to kind of stunt creativity, because people are just using it as sort of this form of just basic perfection, and no deviation
Yeah. Like
from
a crutch.
exact spot on,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. But what people ended up
Yeah.
doing with it is they took the same tool, they turned all the dials and knobs to the extreme, and came out with this really kind of funky effect, which was at the time quite novel and bizarre. And so obviously that's what we know it
Hmm.
for today. But that's just an example of humans taking something which had the ability to really dissolve creativity and coming up with something completely new and creative with that tech. So I think we'll see
Yeah.
that type of
Yeah.
thing happen as well with future AI systems.
Yeah. I definitely sense a recurring theme here, which is just it's how the humans use, like how they choose to use the artificial intelligence that I think really has the impact and has that unique potential for the applications of AI. Cool. So, on a related note, this was our second most popular discussion stirring question from Reddit. And I think you have a few examples for sure for this one. But what have been the most impactful uses of artificial intelligence so far, in your opinion?
So, I mean, there's a lot of things that artificial intelligence has taken over in a sense, and some of them are less straightforward or well known than others. Um, just even
Hmm.
when you think of the weather and being able to predict things now, people have been predicting weather for a long time, but certainly using advanced AI models and whatnot is really allows for a lot more advanced warning, both on the short term. So if a hurricane's coming in, or if there's risk of
Hmm.
extreme weather, but also for longer term, when it climate predictions and looking at climate change and things like that, it's uh, far more
Hmm.
powerful now. So I think that, like, that's something that you might not think of it as being something where AI has taken over, but that's certainly one thing. I think we mentioned this before, but health is something. It's there a
Hmm.
lot more, I think, too, particularly with imaging detection. So taking an MRI, which there's a lot of imaging in an MRI, and it takes a long time for a human to pour over that. So using
Hmm.
various AI technologies to detect certain anomalies in the imaging is something where that can be life changing, right? If people in a much shorter amount of
Yeah.
time can detect things that humans might even miss, right? That's a big one. So uh that's something where AI is popping up quite a bit. And so those are a few big ones. I think security is obviously something, we just even when we're using our phones or whatever devices, the
Hmm.
biometrics, fingerprints, face recognition, this sort of thing. Even fraud detection with, you use your credit card and somebody else uses your credit card, I should say, in a way that you wouldn't normally use it. It can detect those anomalies quite well. So uh,
Yeah.
those it's there as well. And I think even with language as well, it's really more advanced. I think that a lot of that's it's where I work, of course, is with language, but I think
Hmm.
already right now, just if you look at the ability to go traveling or whatever have you, and being able to do speech to speech translation and this sort of thing now, that is pretty amazing, really. To have those abilities to speak to someone else in another language. When have
Yeah.
you been able to do that before? That's a real groundbreaker. I think that is it's one of these things where I think it sort of sneaks up on us, and we don't always realize necessarily that this thing 20, 50 years ago would have been completely sci-fi, and we're there now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last time I traveled, I had an app that let you just speak into it in English and it would translate it and regurgitate that in the language that you want so that you could kind of speak to someone in another country without having to learn the language. Which I don't know, it made me feel like, oh, I'm a little lazy. I could have, like, grabbed a language book and learned a couple of phrases, but that made it so easy. And yeah, that's definitely something I don't think 20, 50 years ago people imagined was possible, unless they're watching Star Trek or something.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's the type of thing I think it will get better too. But I think even from a learning perspective, I think it's really something worth acknowledging. I think that
Hmm.
before, like when you think about it, like you're learning a language. How do I get an example of what might be the correct translation for something that I want to say?
Yeah.
Before you would have to either ask someone or who knows both language, or you would have
Hmm.
to look in a dictionary and try to hash it out for yourself, which doesn't always work out. And so that
Hmm.
it being able to just come up with a pretty good guess of what you're actually trying to translate is extremely
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, even with Dialpad, like, obviously not the same ballpark as something like using AI for climate prediction or healthcare. But even with Dialpad, and when I saw the transcription, the real time transcription, and then understanding that, oh, it's transcribing, there's like American English, but then we're working on Australian English and all these different dialects. That's all just powered by the AI. It kind of just like a light bulb went off almost. I was like, wow, there's like impactful applications for this in so many different contexts. It was pretty amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just the ability to do transcription as well, it was something that, I do it every day, but I don't always think of the impacts that it can have, even from an accessibility perspective. So if someone is, say,
Hmm.
for example, hard of hearing or deaf, and they want to know what's going on in the call, right? That this is an obvious solution for that,
Yeah.
and it inspires us to, make the best possible transcription we can, because people
Yeah.
needed to communicate in certain situations.
Yeah, for real. Okay, so we got our last question, and this one just took the cake. I think I can see why, given the theme of the question, but it had almost 1,000 upvotes, almost 100 comments, and I'm curious about it as well, just personally. But can artificial intelligence really help us talk to the animals? I'm hoping for a yes.
Oh. So once again, I think when people think about this type of question, they're probably thinking, I think, what was it in the movie Up, where they strap helmets or collars or whatever to a bunch of dogs, and then you can hear
Yeah.
what the dogs
Hmm.
are saying, right? What they're thinking. And it's worth kind of breaking it down, right? So I think that animals don't really communicate in the same way that we communicate to each other as humans, right? So um that I think makes the challenge of talking, quote unquote, with animals, to be something that is a little bit less straightforward than you might think. So what we can do is, we can come up with AI that can say, for example, dolphins, for example, I believe have a way of basically sounding their name. So they have a unique acoustic signature for particular
No
dolphins,
way.
right? So I'm not going to try to
Yeah.
imitate their sounds, but you can imagine that each individual dolphin that we might call by a human name, using our
Hmm.
voice, they use their own voices to kind of signal dolphin A, dolphin B,
That's
and that
so
sort of thing.
cool.
So what we could come up with is a way where, say, for example, we say the human name and we basically just map that to the sound that
Hmm.
the dolphin would make to refer to themselves, right? And so we could do something
Hmm.
like that. Although that's not even really something that we would need AI to do necessarily. It could just be as simple as a straightforward
Hmm.
mapping, right? And
Hmm.
on the other side too, like, I mean, we could come up with something where we get all this input from a dog, where we hear the sounds that they make, or the movements, or the gestures,
Yeah.
and yeah, we could make an attempt, for example, to try to uh, translate that, so to speak, to a type of vocalization, right? Where oh, I'm hungry, or
Hmm.
take me outside or something. But the,
Yeah.
the point with that is that it's sort of a novelty item, in a sense that it's kind of funny or whatever, but it's something that you're going to know by what the dog is already doing. So it's something that
Hmm.
you're going to spend all this research trying to get AI to parse it and convert it to language. But the fact is, you as a human are probably already very, very good with that with your own pet. So you know when your
Mm.
dog is hungry, you know when your dog needs to go outside. It's completely
Yeah.
obvious, right? You know when your dog
She
is
paused the
upset
door.
or sleepy or
Yeah.
happy, right? Yeah, exactly, right? So it's all
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So do we really want to go through all this work to create vocalizations? Probably not, unless it's like I said, it could be a novelty item. I think being able to
Yeah.
have a conversation in English or whatever human language you want, that is not something that an animal is going to be able to do in a human sense. One of
Right.
the unique things about human language is the ability to talk about abstract things, right? And um,
Hmm.
animals probably don't do that either at all, or in the way that humans would. And
Hmm.
so in order to do that, the only way you can do it is to train the animal's brain, right? So um
Right.
and to some extent, you're only going to get so far, right? So that, I think, is the
Hmm.
limitation. And then you're talking about training a natural intelligence as opposed to an artificial intelligence, right? So um, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's probably the part that you're going to want to focus on, rather than AI, is the NI, so to speak.
Hmm. Yeah. That was a lot more layers than I thought there would be. That's really interesting. Yeah. Um, Although my dog sometimes when she's barking at like a car or someone coming just down the street, I'm always so curious. Like, what is she like? Is it danger, 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 or is it something else? But maybe in a couple of decades, we might learn that.
Yeah, there might be some things that we can pick out, that might not be as
Yeah.
obvious from humans' observations, right? So, like one thing in particular is like, if we did have some type of collar that was tracking something like heartbeat or neural signals or something like that, we might get a better sense of things than the dog is able to communicate just by their gestures or their own sounds, right?
Yeah.
So there might be some things that we can pick out like that. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, thanks for entertaining us for through all those questions, Jonas. That was probably one of the most fun episodes, I think, this season for sure. Yeah, any last thoughts? Any last comments on AI before we close out?
Well, I think we'll continue to see a lot more of these questions pop up. I think people will kind of be continually
Hmm.
reassessing where we are now, where we could go. There is always going to be, a future, or even beyond, sci-fi, fantastical element to AI. So I think it will start becoming clearer. I think over the next few, decades, as to what are really the easier problems versus what are the harder
Hmm.
problems that really are not going to be easily solved without some further breakthrough in technology. So uh, yeah, that's I think the thing to kind of keep looking out for and keep reassessing. And I think it is healthy to reassess with these types of questions. Uh, where
Yeah,
we
for
are
sure.
now, where we should be going, that sort of thing. So good. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to the audience for joining us this season on Work Beautifully. You can learn more about Dialpad's AI powered unified communications and contact center platform at dialpad.com and find us on your favorite social channels at Dialpad. Stay tuned for next season. The theme is to be announced. So stay tuned for that. And until next time.